Brian, thanks for taking the time.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
You're the founder of Revel CRE. You've been in the commercial real estate business for 20 years.
In our industry, in real estate, you have to almost brainwash yourself to quantify what a productive day is, because you're not cashing a commission check every day or every week or every month. So you have to kind of trick yourself to say, did it feel productive? You have to kind of get to the point where like, all right, I moved all these deals along, and it's a grind. In most cases, I don't know that you can force somebody to sell or to lease a space that they don't need to sell or lease. So you need to find two parties that are like-minded and want to get a deal done. In most cases, nobody wants to feel like they're not getting a fair deal.
Brian, thanks for taking the time.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Really appreciate it. You're the founder of Revel CRE. You've been in the commercial real estate business for 20 years. So since 2004?
Early 2000, yeah.
Okay. Founded Revel a couple years ago now. Lifelong St. Louisan, and I'm always second guessing whether I'm saying that right or not. Or not.
You nailed it.
You still live in the region. You have a wife, 3 children, and you're probably one of the most active commercial real estate brokers, at least in your specific niche in the St. Louis market, at least from what I've seen. And this is, I didn't tell you this before we started recording on purpose. I stopped at a strip center to go to a Smoothie King before coming here. Your sign was out front.
Yeah.
So your signs are they're really starting to pop up all over the place.
It is a slow progression. As you mentioned, Revel Commercial Real Estate's been around now 2 years, just 2 years here recently. And, you throw the first few signs up and, unless you're driving a certain quarter, you're not seeing it. But as they start to multiply, it's neat to hear those stories. And not all the deals come off those signs, but name recognition helps.
Yeah, definitely. I mentioned, your specific niche. Can you let me, the audience, know what that specific niche is in your words? What Revel is focused on today, maybe high level, what the plans are for the future in terms of your focus, and then we'll bring it back and we'll talk about your early experiences.
Yeah. So Revel, we are a commercial brokerage firm. Put simply, we also do management. We operate throughout Missouri and in Southern Illinois. We've got clients throughout the region, big and small. Those clients will take us beyond that geographic area throughout the country. And in those instances, we've got a network of brokers that we'll partner with. But yeah, we work with small, medium-sized businesses locally, investors, tenants. So on the leasing side, we're representing landlords. We got clients that own buildings, similar to you, that might need to fill some space. So we'll help in that case. Or we've got clients who are expanding, looking for more space. And then on the purchase side, we're representing buyers and sellers. We've been active with owner-user purchases of late. It's been challenging, but the owner-user market's been nice because, their businesses need the space and they can weather the interest rates, for a period, because they don't want to slow production down if that's the case. So, so we're, as we progress as Revel, we're working with more and more folks. We've got a team of 4 currently. And that's a good size for now. Eventually we'll want to grow that a little bit, but we're still getting our feet under us. But all has been great the first 2 years. It's been exciting.
When you talk about the potential for future growth, are you going to pick a few of those things you mentioned and really focus on those, or are you going to continue to try to be a lot of different things in the industry?
Good question. I think initially, it was just me getting it started. So I was grasping at every opportunity for work. So, and that's what you do as a broker. Or, you help your friends, you help your family, and then you've got your reoccurring clients. I think as we grow, we've got, so the makeup of our company is, we've got a very senior broker, 40 years experience, great book of business. And then we've got a younger broker learning the business still, 3, 4 years in the business. Um, I think as we progress and we grow the team, I think we'll focus on maybe going after more institutional or corporate work, and but still servicing our kind of bread and butter of local business owners and what's got us to this point. Because there's St. Louis is a there's a lot going on. So yeah, I think to answer, if that answers your question, I think um, we could survive doing what we're doing now, but I think we would like to get grow the corporate business a little bit,
Sure.
and that'll come with time.
Sure. And I know it wasn't an easy journey to get to where you are today. So if you don't mind, can you give a little more background on how you grew up, where you grew up, your first exposure to kind of entrepreneurship or commercial real estate?
Sure. Yeah. So lifelong St. Louisan, lived here my whole life, except going away for college for 4 years. But kind of knew I'd always end up back in St. Louis. I think when we last ran into each other, it's I think you said it was a bit of a hidden gem, and it's a great place to raise a family. So I, even as a 20 something in college, I kind of knew that about St. Louis. So I knew I'd end up back in St. Louis. But so out of college, worked for a local corporate real estate firm, and we handled Edward Jones leasing throughout the country. So with very little real estate experience, it was a great way to dive in and learn leases and learn site selection and kind of interact with the clients. So that was a uh, great way to learn the business. And then um, left there and went to work for a developer in town and did kind of some pre-leasing on developments. 2008, 2009 hit, and developments dried up. And then went to work for a boutique firm in town here. So I feel like I've seen kind of the corporate side as well as the boutique side, um, and then I had one more stop of a, a national firm in town, and then that kind of led me to going off on my own. But as far as growing up, my family's been in construction, tied to real estate. So I didn't know I'd want to get into the business necessarily, but it was something that I felt comfortable with it, hearing the terminology and some of those things growing up. So, um, it wasn't always the plan, but I'm glad that it's kind of worked out this way.
I want to ask how or why you jumped into entrepreneurship versus working for some of the larger shops. But before we get there, you mentioned knowing at a young age that St. Louis was a special place. I'm assuming, I don't want to assume, but at the same time, I feel like this is a fair assumption. When you were 20 years old, you weren't thinking about the fact that we have the number of highways we have, the access to rail, the access to water, the airports, the schools, the safety in certain parts of the region. Were you thinking about those things, or were you thinking about other stuff?
No, other thing. No, I think about that stuff now, but no, as a 20-year-old, you think of your experience as a kid and thinking fondly of it, and um in kind of like-minded folks, growing up with, and so it was more of that kind of brought me back to St. Louis. But those things you mentioned are things that we all, as business owners and people that are doing business in St. Louis, think about a lot. Is kind of what's keeping St. Louis from getting to where it could be.
And I'm sure you'd agree it will go at some point.
Yeah, I think I'm certainly optimistic, and whether it's you're a business owner and property owner, we all kind of need to be optimistic. But I really do feel like there's some great potential here. You mentioned the infrastructure in town. We've got the capacity uh, to really do better than we're doing. What's gonna kick that off is kind of yet to be seen. But I think St. Louis is a lot going for it.
As someone who's an outsider, so not a lifelong St. Louisan, but hopefully my kids will be. Uh, aside from the stuff we kind of touched on, you have the cultural amenities that you wouldn't find for a city of its size due to the historical significance. You have parks, amazing parks, better weather than Canada, where I'm from. You also have access to fresh water if, climate change and other things become an issue in the future. What else would you add to that list? I know I'm putting you on the spot here, but what else would you add to the list of why you think St. Louis should do better than it's currently doing?
Great question. I think a lot of the things you said, geographically, we're located in the heart of the country. Transportation, we got the river, rail system, certainly highways running every which way. Um, that is probably something we need to, and there's great organizations pushing all of that. But that is a big selling point for St. Louis. Affordability. There's a lot going for it. There's we were a city of, we were a larger city at one point, so I feel like the capacity is there to grow back into that. So a lot of the infrastructure was established for or planning for a larger city, but yeah, it's sometimes frustrating to see some of our Midwestern or other cities passing us up or winning opportunities that you would think we'd be better, just as well suited for. So, but we have to be hopeful that we're gonna start having some wins, and you just need a few to be the Nashvilles and the Indies and the KCs of the world. Do you do any work in Kansas City? Do you stretch over that far?
No, I don't. No, so we're focused strictly on St. Louis, MSA, Southern Illinois,
Yeah.
Central Missouri.
Yeah.
I'm not as well traveled around the country as you are, but I will say, based on the impressions that I've had in other parts of the country, and definitely in Canada, but just talking about the U.S., I feel like St. Louis really offers different flavors. You could go to a Kirkwood and feel like you're in a completely different city versus like a Chesterfield or Lafayette Square versus Fairview Heights. There's just so many different flavors depending on the lifestyle you want to live.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. You've got an infinite amount of lifestyles, as you say. Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely right. And you can raise your kids up however you choose. Yeah, no, I think it's great. I get a kick out of you being from Canada, finding this your home and thinking highly of it. Just as someone from St. Louis, I enjoy hearing that.
Yeah, and we can talk more off the record about my thoughts on Canada, but we'll move past that for now.
You mentioned St. Louis's weather. I mean, St. Louis's weather, I mean, compared to Canada is obviously warmer, but the weather has almost become a attribute here. The winters are not nearly as bad. The summers are really, other than a few weeks, are not that bad. So, and I don't know how much that's going to drive growth, but it's kind of nice to be living here.
Yeah, I would agree. It's nice to not shovel your driveway, at once a week. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure you were used to that as a kid. I'm sure.
Yeah. So going back to your commercial real estate journey, I'm sure you had the option of pursuing a corporate career after you had already been in kind of the corporate side, we'll call it, for 20 years, close to 20 years. Why did you decide to start Revel? And, what was the thought process behind creating your firm? What was the gap you were seeing in the market?
So I before starting Revel, I worked for a national firm, and we happened to be an affiliate office. So we had the corporate flag, we had the resources and whatnot. Um, there's great things, there's resources that I don't have on the big national firms, but when you get down to it, it's transacting deals, and whether corporate or boutique, the work is largely the same. Um, there's, I feel like at Revel, we have all the resources we need. We've got a great marketing manager, um, can put together the same materials that I feel like a corporate real estate firm could. So it was kind of getting into that of, sure, you're going to miss out on, at least initially, some of the reoccurring corporate work. But I felt like I was at a point in my career at the time, 18, 20 years into it, that um, I was willing to take that risk, that my clients were not loyal to the flag I was at, but they were more loyal to me, and that they would come follow me, and that was the case, and that was a relief getting things off the ground. But yeah, it is a leap of faith in a lot of ways. All those people could have said, no, we're not following you, and I don't know where I'd be right now. So um I don't know that I always thought that I would be working for myself, but it's a grind, but I'm happy that it's turned out this way.
So I've only met really great brokers in St. Louis. Like the stereotype of a commercial real estate broker has not been true in my experience in St. Louis. I'm sure it exists in other markets, but at least not here from what I've seen. Did that type of culture of just being with a bigger shop where maybe it's a little more cutthroat, did that play any role in you wanting to start your own shop and build your own company culture, or were you at a place where that was non-existent, like kind of a more competitive, cutthroat environment?
Where my last stop was not that cutthroat. In fact, the makeup of that firm was uh great brokers with a lot of experience, but I was the youngest by a fair amount. So um I've got younger kids, and I'm motivated in different ways than at the time some of my partners there were. So um no, I think there's great brokers at all most all the shops for sure. And so no, I don't know, the cutthroatness of working for a corporate firm is not any more cutthroat than the pressure I put on myself, or that comes with its own pressure. So no, I don't think I'm relieved of any pressure going off on my own in any stretch. But I think it was finally a point that I felt comfortable enough to do it. Um, and it was not, honestly, the corporate aspect didn't really, it wasn't avoiding that. It was the reason I was going off my rock.
And then, since starting Revel, I know it's only been a few years now, but you've built the groundwork for what is going to be something even larger than what it is today. But building that groundwork, can you kind of speak on the challenges you faced there? How hard were the first 6 months, the first 10, 12 months of being on your own,
Yeah.
trying to provide value to the clients you're bringing over while also trying to build a business at the same time?
Yeah, no, it's all encompassing early on. Even before I had any support and as far as marketing and stuff, it was, all on myself, and it still is in a lot of days, bookkeeping wise, and a lot of stuff that I'm pulled a lot of different directions. But yeah, no, there's money going out the door. Buying a 50 signs that need to go up, then but it's all exciting stuff because you want to create a brand, and you're creating your logo, you're doing all that stuff. So the first 6 months is just whatever. You say yes to everything, and we got to get the website, we got to do all this, and it's only till things slow down or level off to where you can say, all right, now we can go back and see if we did that right, and if we got to tweak something. And um but yeah, the groundwork, I think I appreciated that was important, if this was going to be something that was going to grow. um so I tried to plan on growth when making some of those decisions. Um, Today, 2 years in, it's day to day. It's mostly just working with clients, which is what I want mainly do. Um, Everything else is, kind of already established, and the groundwork's been laid, I think.
Is there any particular point in time where it was just so challenging or all encompassing that you considered quitting
Um,
and going back?
I would be lying if I said no. I'm trying to think if there's a specific instance. No, I mean, no, yes, there was. But I'd imagine any entrepreneur, anybody starting a business, it comes to that point, and it's kind of I said a leap of faith, but it becomes kind of blind faith that you're gonna do what you can and work as hard as you can each day, and things will fall into place. And there's still, I imagine, there'll always be those stressful times, and um, it's a stressful business. We were talking briefly that it's not as glamorous as people seem to think, and I don't know why why they think that sometimes. But yeah, no, I there was certainly times that I've thought I might have made a mistake, but you kind of got to forge through that and come out the other side. Hopefully, that's the belief that I had.
Sure. And I would fully agree with you. I think if anyone says they're an entrepreneur and they didn't feel like that at least at some point, that they're not digging deep enough.
Yeah.
And I'm sure, if you reflect back on it, there's moments,
Yes.
without a doubt. You mentioned that Revel being a smaller firm, you're still able to kind of provide some of the same services, whether it's marketing or even maybe some of the data you have access to as a larger firm. So, are you able to speak on maybe what you're able to provide that is similar to the larger firms, and then what you guys do that's different? And then also, I'm just curious for my own understanding, if you were to start in 2012 instead of 2022, do you think you would have had access to those same tools, or do you think just that technology landscape has changed and leveled the playing field?
That's exactly right. So no, I don't think I would be as confident competing against companies that are brokerage firms that are much larger than me without the technology. And uh, kind of getting back to your initial question was, yeah, that technology is the main leveling of the playing field, I think. Um, we largely all use a lot of the same databases and whatnot. From a marketing standpoint, demographics, studies, all that stuff. We've got a great marketing person. She's worked at all the big firms in town. So I would put her work up against all of our competitors. So I do feel that we can offer the same products, and in some cases, at least where we are now, I think it's a good story to tell that h- myself and we're a small enough firm that you're going to get me and you're going to get Tim in my office, or you're going to get Miguel. I mean, we're going to be the guys that are answering the phone. We're not big enough, and I hope that's always the case, but we're certainly not big enough yet to be able to just hand it off and say, I hope this junior broker does a great job for you. That's not where we're at, and that's not where I'd like to ever be. But um, that's something our clients appreciate, is that they know they're going to get me, or they're going to get Tim in our office who has 40 years experience, and we're going to be the guys answering the phone.
Is that typically how it works at bigger shops then? Because, like, I've primarily done business with smaller shops, but, if you see a flyer of a deal that closed and you see like 10 names on there with the lead broker, call it, is it typically that in a bigger shop, a lead broker is bringing business in and then it's other folks who are, quote, maybe doing the other work?
I think that can be the case. In bigger shops, there's corporate clients that are, depending on the product type, is going to a certain, team or what have you, and how those teams break it up is different in every case. But there's usually a lead or two leads in a team of four or five, and um, time. It's just, there's only so much time, so that one person can't work everything. So yeah, it eventually will trickle down. Not like unlike a law firm where the managing partner's not working on everything. He's probably bringing in the business, but it's trickling down to some of the junior partners maybe. So um, I think that's probably how it is in a lot of cases, and that's something that I've seen, and I need to be aware of that, because I want the service we provide now to be the service that we're going to provide in the future. And at some point, it may not be realistic that I can be on everything, or Tim in my office can be on everything, because I want to grow the business, and hopefully we're busy enough that that's not an option. But I'm mindful of that.
Sure. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. This may be a tough question to answer, but if someone wanted to get into the industry today, would would they be better off working at a small shop like yours, or a larger organization, given the fact that they may touch every piece of a transaction with you guys, but with the larger shop, they may only be touching one piece like a million times? Is there a better direction to go in?
No, it's a good question. I started, I know there's a great program in town that does just corporate services, and that was a good way for me to learn. I don't know what the right answer honestly is for that. In my case, that worked well. Um, Working at a smaller firm, you do get to maybe get your hands on different parts of a transaction and maybe different asset classes and whatnot. But they might lack some of the time to dedicate. I mean, there's a lot you can learn from being in meetings and in helping draft LOIs and leases, or we're not drafting this, but contracts and whatnot. But it takes a unique person to be able to be thrown into a boutique firm and absorb what they need to absorb and kind of grow on their own. I mean, there's some self-starting involved, whether you're at a big corporate firm or a boutique firm. So, I think it's hard. I'm not answering your question, but I think it depends on the broker maybe.
Sure. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. When I asked, I knew it's a question that is probably difficult to answer. So thank you for trying. I appreciate it.
But there's places for there's a lot of people who get into commercial real estate. It's a fun business, but eventually you got to have some thick skin and really work. You got to be a self-starter, as I said before, and that's something that can be learned, but it helps to have a little bit of that in you from the get-go.
You mentioned it's a tough business. Given the amount of deals you've worked on, I'm sure that you've seen your fair share of interesting, challenging deals. Would love to talk about specific deals and get into the nuts and bolts, because I think that's where a lot of people find value. And also, personally, I find it very interesting to hear about other people's deals. There was one that you mentioned before we started recording, the Missouri Research Park. Can you give us the background there?
Yeah. Does that mean anything, Missouri Research Park?
It does to me, but let's give some more
Yeah,
context
yeah,
for
yeah. No, and
folks.
not just because some people don't
Yeah.
are far familiar with it. So it was a research park, as the name says. It's just over the Missouri River along 40, and it was started due to the flood of '93, when Chesterfield flooded. They needed some high and dry ground, and the University of Missouri it's their kind of their project. So it's unique in that it was all, it's all research. Nike was there. There's a lot of lab space. Um, that was all in the valley that needed to get up and running and not be down too long. So this particular transaction, it was just kind of a unique one. It was Wells Fargo. We represented Wells Fargo, who was the seller, but it was in their different transitions back to A.G. Edwards. It was their disaster recovery center that they had created for the Y2K
Oh wow.
thing, which is kind of
Okay.
interesting. So it was really kind of interesting to see. So it was a 130,000 square foot warehouse that was essentially, at one point they had 800 desks, all hardwire plugged, that if the world went to heck, they could all go there and still trade and do whatever they needed to. So fast forward through Wachovia, then eventually to Wells Fargo. They being as big as they were, they had these disaster recovery centers around the country. So they finally came to the position that they wanted to sell it. So it was overbuilt in a lot of ways. So I mean, the the what they had in there wasn't really for a warehouse user. So that was a unique thing, but someone in the park eventually bought it. But it's unique. The university has basically owned all the ground. So there was layers of getting it off the ground lease, and there was added steps that you wouldn't normally see, and that's kind of what commercial real estate is that no deal is the same. I mean, there are a lot of added layers that make deals complicated.
So let's dig into that deal. I just want to make sure I'm understanding it correctly. Wells Fargo owned it. They contacted you guys to sell it on their behalf. Was anyone working there, or was it just sitting empty?
It was still available to be used, and I think what finally led them to the realization they didn't need it is they thought during COVID that people might, instead of going to the big campus down in Midtown, that they might go to this center, and nobody was using it. They were able to do what they needed to from home primarily. So no one was really there.
Got it. And when you take on a project like that, what tells you whether it should be marketed to like an owner user or to an investor? Is it just the matter of if there's a lease in place and then you're going to market it to an investor? If it's vacant, it's being marketed to owner users, or?
Yeah, I think exactly right. Yeah, if there was a lease and certainly if Wells Fargo was on a lease and had some term, it would be an attractive investment. Um, they were not willing to. They were not interested in staying, so it was most likely a user. For a speculative investor, it would probably have to be a pretty good deal to figure out what you're going to do with the property at that point. But we knew it would probably be a user, and we knew probably the user was within the park there, because it's a high tech lab kind of area, and that's who ended up buying it. Someone who was expanding, and but there was, as at the time, warehouse and industrial stuff, and still continues to be the case, is sought after. But yeah, no, it was interesting, and you come across those things you learn new, you haven't experienced, so that's kind of the fun part of the business. No two deals are the same.
So on that deal, you targeted the owner user because of the building itself being unique. The seller not necessarily being motivated to where it wasn't going to be a fire sale, and a speculative person could have just come in and buy it and figure out what to do with it. And then also, you mentioned you knew it was going to be someone kind of within that area that would probably take that space on. So was that a deal that you decided to put out there, email blast, LoopNet, Crexy, whatever, or did you just approach people quietly to find the right buyer?
All the above. I mean, I think there's an expectation, unless we're instructed otherwise, there's an expectation to get it out as visible as possible from all of our clients. So, you mentioned the Crexys, the LoopNets, the CoStars of the world. There are circumstances where a property owner wouldn't want it totally, because business may still be going on in that business, and they're sensitive to employees and whatnot. But this was not the case. So we wanted to get it out as broad, and it was unique enough that it could have been a user from out of state, or so we wanted to get it as broadly marketed as possible. But also there's a level of, we also thought a high likelihood that one of the 30 other businesses in the park might be a buyer. So it's old school dropping off flyers. I mean, there is still a lot of that in commercial real estate. So, literally door knocking. The digital stuff is a game changer. I mean, that gets you exposure to everybody. But there's a lot of targeted calls. There's, talking to the city, seeing if they know of people. So it's a lot of layers of it. But
Sure.
to answer your question, it's everything. Everything we can do.
And that's O'Fallon, Missouri, right? Is that where that is?
At
or-
St. Charles.
St. St. Charles? Okay. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I live not far from
Well,
there.
I'm
But
sorry, it's Welland Spring, but it's right
okay.
over. It's St. Charles County. Yeah.
Got it. Got it. And then the other question on that, you mentioned the ground lease.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a very unique building, a very unique potential buyer or very specific potential buyer, and then there's a ground lease. How do you come up with a value?
So you have to kind of understand the ground lease perspective, because if there's any loan that these businesses are going to get, they need it to be a fee simple ground and building purchase. It's hard to. And we see this with ground lease all the time. Banks aren't so willing to loan on a building that's not going to be theirs when the ground lease is up, right? So we had to get an understanding of that, and it's communicating with the university, and they had some foresight to say this. They kind of saw this would happen at some point, that there was a clearly stated buyout of to buy the ground, so that had to happen before we closed with the buyer. Um, so that kind of they were easy to deal with. They were motivated to see somebody using the building and active in the park. So, but yeah, no, it happened to be that it was kind of clearly stated that, all right, seller, you gotta buy the ground, and then we'll be able to sell the building in the ground.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. That's a very unique deal. I mean, we're so specific with what we do. I don't see, or I'm not involved in a lot of unique deals because we're trying to do more or less the same thing over and over again. So I love to hear stories like that of just what else is going on in the real estate world.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's you get into environmentals, and you get into a lot of surveys and all that stuff. There's a lot of things that need to be checked out before you proceed.
You also had a recent office deal where you had to get creative and move some of the tenants around in order to make space for the new client moving in.
Yeah, yeah. So that was one that just closed in the last couple months, and I mentioned it to you just because it was uh just to show that these deals, nothing's ever easy. So we had marketed it for quite a while, and it was an owner user building. We knew that, but there wasn't enough space. A lot of these buyers, if they're getting an SBA loan, they need to occupy at least 50% of the building, and we couldn't deliver that. So we had to, with the direction from the seller, we had to essentially renegotiate all the leases in the building and move tenants around to be able to free up enough space for this user who needed the space. So, that led to trying to find new homes for some of these tenants, or renegotiating tenants, moving them within the building. So it ended up being quite an ordeal to move everybody around, but that was just kind of what needed to happen for that sale to happen.
I'm genuinely curious here. I'm not just trying to position this as an episode of us pushing boutique brokerages, but would a large brokerage do that for a client?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And I should say I'm a big believer that businesses and investors should use a commercial real estate broker, whether myself or anybody, because there is some expertise and guidance that it's needed. But yeah, I think so.
That's good to know because I know if I was the seller and it turned out that we need to renegotiate every lease and move people around, if we had to do that and we're already swamped with whatever we do day to day, I'd probably just not
Daunting.
sell.
Right. Exactly right. Yeah. Yeah. And we only came to that realization after 6 months or 12 months of marketing it and realizing this, if you want to sell it, this is what we got to do. But I'm with you. Most sellers would have been like, all right, I'm just gonna kick the can down the road and
Right.
worry about it a few years from now.
Did you get a lot of pushback from the tenants that you were renegotiating with?
Yeah. 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 So the building was in Kirkwood, and it was a sought after area. Yeah. I mean, nobody wants to move, and there's relationships with landlords and tenants that I was instructed to kind of be in the middle of and play broker, and say, this is kind of what the seller wants to do. And, your lease is coming up or it's up. And we'd like to, and luckily this seller wasn't going to strong arm anybody into something that didn't feel right. But everyone was understanding, and kind of, if you frame something the right way, I think everyone ultimately was in agreement. And finally, after a year of work on it, got it across the finish line.
That's good to hear, and I'm sure it can't be easy for you. So I've got to ask you. I'm sure the years of experience are what have led up to it, but do you have any easy tips on negotiating? Because, it's not easy, like you were saying, to negotiate with folks who maybe don't want to move, or even, for example, on the land lease deal, just, getting in touch with the right person at the university and letting them know what your plans are. Do you have any tips for just general negotiations?
In most cases, I don't know that you can force somebody to sell or to lease a space that they don't need to sell or lease. So, you need to find two parties that are like-minded and want to get a deal done. So, and when you find that, then, and a lot of times I represent one side, but you want to find a common ground that works for both sides. You know, in most cases, nobody wants to feel like they're getting railroaded into anything they don't want to do, or feel like they're not getting a fair deal. So, um, it's there's give and take, as cliche as that might sound, to find a common ground that works for both sides. Um, so yeah, no, I don't know that I have any special formula, but it's communication, and kind of hearing both sides out.
Sure. No, that makes perfect sense. A friend of mine once told me, and he's a broker. He's been in business for 40 years. He told me his goal is always to have two people smiling at the closing
Yeah.
table. It doesn't always happen, but that's his goal, and
Yeah.
I'm sure that helps with the negotiating and having people meet in the middle on stuff.
I completely subscribe to that. Yeah, no, it doesn't have to be a winner or loser or a zero-sum game that one guy's getting extra dollars because the other guy's not. But there's definitely ways of skinning it where both parties leave happy.
Sure.
Yeah.
You're currently working on an interesting deal in the city. It's on Hampton. Yeah. Can you speak to geographically where that's located and then what's going on with that deal?
Hampton near 40. It's a retail property. And it was in our previous conversations. It was one that I mentioned just because of the challenges that we have. And um there's there's property issues, environmental, uh the structure that's there, and kind of pricing out renovations. But there's also city and municipal hurdles you've gotta get over. And this particular property, it's clear that it needs to get redeveloped. The building needs to come down. And um
So it's currently a retail center that needs to be torn down?
yeah, a retail
Okay.
building. Yeah, and it's just obsolete, and it would cost too much money uh to bring it up to code, frankly. So, I think everyone agrees on that. All the aldermen, everybody is in agreement on that. But in this instance, it just happened. There's a sliver. It's always been commercial as far back as anybody can really remember. There's a sliver of ground that was zoned residential in the parking lot, and it all makes sense that before you redevelop it, all needs to be commercial. But sometimes the path to get there is bumpy. So I mean, this has been a year of getting the approvals needed, neighborhoods buy-in, and but I feel like we're to the point where it'll happen. So there's just always deals are in my 20 plus year career, deals have never been this complicated. There's just always something. And and that's fine, as long as your clients kind of know that there's going to be something that pops up. And um but in most cases, again, the seller was willing to provide more time. we've probably extended that contract 7 times, because city meetings, there was another hearing that they had to, go in front of the Board of Aldermen or P&Z or whatever it was. And the seller was willing to do it. The buyer was doing everything that they said they would throughout the process. They were investing money and plans and, attorney's fees. So, that's been a challenging one, but not contentious where every contract extension is torture. It's like, I get it. You've done what you said you're going to do, and we'll give you the extra 30 days or whatever. But no, it's just another example that every property is different, you know, depending on the use, depending on, where it sits. And so, yeah, it's interesting.
So they're redeveloping retail into just a different type of retail.
It is retail, right?
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
The environmental issue you mentioned, if you can speak on it, and if you can't, that's fine. Can you share what it was or what that issue?
Well, this one, there was not an environmental
Okay.
issue, but there was. I mentioned that just because that is increasingly on every deal, something that needs to be researched, or tested or whatever it might be. This proximity to there was environmental studies done and ended up being fine. Proximity to gas stations, proximity to former dry cleaners, and the site was neither of those, but the fact that it is close to what was a gas station or a dry cleaner creates problems, and oftentimes you have to do some soil testing, and but it ended up being fine in this case.
So I've heard that from other people as well regarding dry cleaners and the gas stations as well. But for retail in particular, is it I guess maybe a good general rule of thumb to just be very cautious if you're looking to buy a retail center that has a dry cleaner tenant in there?
So a lot of the environmental issues is from how they used to do the dry cleaning and chemicals and solvents they were using and whatnot. I think, I'm not an expert on this, I think they're using more environmental friendly uh, uh, chemicals. Um, but no, you need to be aware of what's there, and that's where the phase one environmental is basically a historical research of what was done there and what was done around there. It's good to know what if that was the case. It might make you want to consider researching further. But honestly, if you're getting a loan, the bank needs that comfort that when you go to sell it, you've got something you can sell, and then there's not a huge contamination there. But there was dry cleaners, everywhere. There's gas stations everywhere. Um, doesn't mean everyone is dirty. But it just means you should probably just do your research and get comfortable with it.
Sure. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You mentioned the planning and zoning hurdles issues. What could aside from the residential parcel, what could the possible opposition be to wanting to replace retail with retail?
So it's in, within the city of St. Louis, you've got aldermanic districts, you've got also neighborhood associations. So that's two groups that you need to get comfortable with the use. So it's meeting with the neighborhood association, meeting at the alder person. There's a lot of things. There's from a design standpoint, there's parking. Is the parking going to be uh, creeping into the neighborhood too much? Is there a drive-through associated with it? Where's that dumping out? Is that going to be creating some issues? That's kind of P&Z handles all that, and there's changes throughout the process. You're going to submit something, they're going to say, well, what if you did this? And we feel more comfortable if you did this. And that's a process in itself. But oftentimes when you're starting new, that's kind of the neighborhood and city's opportunity to say, well, let's think about doing this because this building's been here for 60 years and we're tired of looking at it and we think we can do a little better. So, I'm blanking on your question, but
Oh,
hopefully that
just
answered it.
you did answer it. It
Okay.
was just some of the hurdles that might come up with replacing retail with retail. So it sounds like it's the architectural style, the parking, the traffic concerns, things like that for the most part.
Absolutely, yeah. You've got landscaping buffers. You've got there's a lot that goes into new development. In each step of the way, there's approvals that go along with that.
What do you guys have planned for next year and the year after, just in terms of your immediate growth strategy? I know high level, we kind of talked about it early on. Do you plan on bringing on more brokers? Do you plan on just trying to bring in more clients and then you grow the team organically?
Yeah, so I think in a perfect world, it's a mix of recruiting or bringing someone on with some experience, 10 years of experience with some book of business of their own, and also continuing to bring in a younger person and train them. And um, so I think it's that is a goal in the next year. So to grow the team by one or two. Also, try to grow. We've got some property management that we're doing, so to grow that as well. So yeah, I think just kind of, but day to day, it's kind of servicing our clients and making sure everyone is getting in the service that they need. But yeah, no, I think I would like to bring a couple brokers on in the next year or so.
On the property management side, are you guys focused on just retail, or is it retail, industrial, office? Is there any focus?
No, currently it's primarily industrial, but I think ultimately I'd like to. We do all asset classes from a brokerage standpoint, so um, I think we'd like to grow property management in all asset classes. Frankly,
Sure, sure, makes sense. With industrial property management, is it literally just collecting checks? Because I don't even know what your responsibilities would look like there, and contract negotiation.
so in so these are all single tenant buildings, so they're pretty simple. Um, it's checking up on the properties, talking to the and these are all throughout Missouri, and I think just throughout Missouri. So as far as Kansas City, um, yeah. So it's stopping by once a month, or meeting with the GM. And but you're right. It's in speaking of like contracts and stuff, they're often self-performing all of the common area maintenance, as we call it. So the snow removal and the landscaping, they're doing a lot of that themselves. In the single tenant building, when there's multi-tenant, if it's a multi-tenant building, you need the landlord to kind of oversee everything and bill it back. But so yeah, there's not. That's kind of part of the attraction to industrials that
Sure.
uh, I'm sure you're not hearing from tenants at 10 o'clock at night that their hot water's not working, and I'm sure your management team deals with constantly. Um, so there is a ease of management for those.
Just in case it didn't come through on the audio or anything, when I said just collecting checks, I was half kidding. Just
No,
because
no, no, I know.
apartment management is very intensive,
Yes,
and it doesn't matter what kind of real estate it is. If you don't have a true professional actively managing it, looking out for the best interests of the property like it's a business, then that's when you start to see some properties go
yeah,
sideways.
absolutely, yeah.
Really appreciate your time, Brian. The hour or so really flew by. We like to end each episode with what we call a hole in one. Just your greatest piece of advice that you can offer to someone that they can implement in their life or business today or
Yeah,
immediately.
I think the something I think I've said a few times in the hour is, if I can give any advice, it's to grind, and that can take a form in different ways. But it's working a full day, working in our industry, in real estate, you have to almost brainwash yourself to quantify what a productive day is, because you're not cashing a commission check every day or every week or every month. So you have to kind of trick yourself to say, did it feel productive? And you kind of in it, but you have to kind of get to the point where, like, all right, I moved all these deals along, and it's a grind. So like I think you have to train yourself, and I think it can be learned that you have to kind of really work it. to be in this industry, and I think it's true in really any industry, is that it's a process, and you kind of it's a grind, but it can be fun.
That's a great perspective. I didn't think of it that way. When you're a broker, you're not getting paid on a consistent basis. So how are you measuring that productivity? That's a great point.
Yeah,
Never
so
thought.
it's almost a feeling at this point. It's like I felt like it was a good day, and I have bad days, it's stressful because they're like, oh, I didn't talk to the all the people I needed to talk to. Um, but at this point in my career, I kind of know when I've had a productive day. Early on, it's just you're spinning wheels, and a lot can be learned in spinning wheels. But as you get further in your career, you can kind of understand when you've made some progress. But yeah, I mean, you're not closing on a building every week, right? But it takes a lot of work to get to those closings. So you have to feel like you're inching it along every day, and you're working on 100 deals at any given time. You just got to feel like you're at the same time trying to bring in more deals in the pipeline. So um, it's yeah. So it's you got to kind of condition yourself that way.
Appreciate you sharing that. Where can people connect with you, learn more about Revel as well?
Yeah, Revel Commercial Real Estate, revelcre.com. All myself and all of our brokers, our team contacts are on there. I'm happy to. I enjoy talking real estate, so I think I hear from some folks that they don't want to waste somebody's time, and it's never a waste of time to talk about a piece of property you might have, and there's no expectation that um, you're committing to using me. So, uh, and I think a lot of brokers would feel that same way. Is that um, when in doubt, if you're worried of not sure what your property might be worth, give myself or a broker a call. But I am a big believer in these deals can get complicated to use a broker when you have the opportunity.
I appreciate your time again. And I do want to add one thing real quick because I think you mentioned something very important. The brief interactions we've had, particularly on a deal a couple years ago, I never felt an ounce of pressure. And I think that's very important. I think it's great that you let people kind of come to their own conclusions. And I'm sure people appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. Yeah, and it's St. Louis is a funny town that was a few weeks we were chatting, and it didn't work out, and we both went our own way, and we crossed paths recently, and but I appreciate you saying that. No, I am certainly not a hard pressure broker for the reasons we talked about. I want people to feel like they had a fair deal at the end of the day.
Thanks again for your time. Appreciate it, Brian.
Thank you for having me. This was great.